Welcome to the channel. Before we begin today's story, I'd like to ask for your support. If you like documentaries, detective films, and true stories like this, please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. It may seem like a small thing, but it helps YouTube recommend these videos to more people and helps the channel grow. Thank you. Now, let's talk about Lars Mittank. Zaragoza, Spain. Police officers arrive at an ordinary apartment building on Gascon de Gotor Street. They are not investigating a murder. There has been no robbery. No one has disappeared. The residents have asked for help because something inside the apartment appears impossible to explain. A voice seems to be coming from the area of the kitchen stove. The family has searched the room. The neighbors have listened. No one can find the person behind it. And before the investigation is over, several police officers would later report hearing the mysterious voice themselves. The events took place in an apartment occupied by the Palazón family. It was not an isolated house. Several families lived in the same apartment building. The apartments shared walls, floors, and chimney structures. That detail mattered. In older buildings, unusual sounds can sometimes travel in unexpected ways. A voice from another apartment may seem to come from inside a wall. A sound from a lower floor may travel through a chimney or other structural spaces. For that reason, investigators first attempted to rule out ordinary explanations, but that would prove far more difficult than anyone expected. By September 1934, reports of unsettling sounds had begun attracting attention. Residents described laughter, cries, and a rough voice that seemed to come from the kitchen area. At first, the simplest explanation seemed the most reasonable. Perhaps a neighbor was playing a prank. Perhaps sound was traveling through the chimney. Perhaps someone was hidden nearby. Then, according to multiple contemporary accounts, the voice appeared to respond to people inside the room. That changed everything. A random noise can be ignored. A voice that appears to answer a question demands investigation. The Palazón family employed a young domestic worker named Pascuala Alcocer. She would later become one of the central figures in the case. According to newspaper reports and witness accounts, Pascuala first heard the voice while working near the kitchen stove. Frightened, she called others into the room. They reportedly heard it as well. From that moment, the mystery was no longer based on a single witness. It became a shared experience. And shared experiences deserve careful evaluation. They can strengthen a report when multiple people independently describe the same event. But psychologists also know that people can unintentionally influence one another's perceptions, especially during unusual or emotionally charged situations. Determining which of those possibilities applied in Zaragoza would become one of the investigation's greatest challenges. News quickly spread through the building. Neighbors entered the apartment. Some listened near the kitchen stove. Others examined the chimney. According to multiple witness accounts, the voice did not behave like a continuous mechanical sound. It appeared at irregular moments. Sometimes it remained silent. Sometimes it appeared to interrupt conversations. And at other times, it seemed to respond to what people in the room were saying or doing. Those reports made the phenomenon especially difficult to investigate. A pipe can be inspected. A machine can be tested. A hidden speaker can be searched for. But an unpredictable voice offers investigators no consistent pattern to examine. And without a repeatable pattern, finding a conventional explanation became much more difficult. Eventually, the authorities were contacted. Police officers arrived at the apartment. They examined the kitchen. They searched the surrounding rooms. The first priority was to rule out ordinary explanations: a hidden person, a prank, or sounds traveling through the building's structure. According to contemporary reports, the initial searches revealed no obvious source of the voice, no concealed device, no hidden person, no clear route by which someone could produce the sounds. Instead of bringing the mystery to an end, the arrival of the police gave it even greater attention, because now the investigation extended beyond the Palazón family. Crowds soon began gathering outside the building. Newspapers quickly turned the strange events into a national story. Before long, the mysterious voice became known as El Duende de Zaragoza. In Spanish folklore, a duende is often described as a mysterious household spirit or goblin. But that name introduced an important challenge. Once the phenomenon was given a supernatural label, it became easier for people to interpret it through that lens. Long before anyone had determined the true source of the reported voice, the mystery already had a memorable name. And memorable names can shape public perception, sometimes more powerfully than evidence itself. Whether the voice had an ordinary explanation or something far more unusual was still very much an open question. The Zaragoza case illustrates how the language we use can shape the way people interpret unusual events. If someone is told that a building has faulty pipes, every strange noise may sound mechanical. If that same person is told a mysterious spirit lives inside the walls, the very same noise may seem intentional. The sound itself may not change, but the interpretation often does. Psychologists often refer to this as the framing effect. Once an event is framed in a particular way, later evidence is often interpreted through that same lens. That doesn't prove the original explanation was wrong, nor does it prove it was correct. It simply reminds us that perception and evidence are not always the same thing. The police investigation continued. Engineers and technical specialists were consulted. The kitchen was carefully examined. So were the walls, the floors, and the chimney system. According to later accounts, investigators even opened parts of the structure while searching for a concealed source of the voice. Yet no ordinary explanation gained universal acceptance, and some reports claimed that the voice continued, even while the apartment remained under observation. If those reports were accurate, then whatever had produced the sounds had not been identified. If they were not, then the growing public attention may have complicated the search for the truth. Either way, the mystery only became more difficult to explain. Yet there was another possibility. What if the voice was not coming from a hidden device? What if it was somehow being produced by a person who was already in the room? As the investigation continued, attention gradually turned toward Pascuala. Some observers suggested ventriloquism. Others wondered whether she might somehow have been producing the sounds without consciously intending to. But those ideas faced a serious difficulty. Suspicion is not evidence. And according to contemporary reports, the voice was sometimes heard while Pascuala was under close observation, and, in some accounts, even after she had been taken away from the immediate area. Were completely accurate has remained a matter of debate, but they were enough to keep the mystery alive. This does not prove that Pascuala was innocent, and it does not prove that she was responsible. Instead, it highlights something even more important. The surviving accounts are incomplete. Many were recorded through newspapers, public interest, and later retellings. Like all historical sources, they must be read with care. We know that many people reported hearing a mysterious voice. We know that the authorities investigated the apartment. But we do not possess a complete modern record of every examination, every witness statement, or every investigative step. And when the historical record is incomplete, certainty becomes risky. The most honest conclusion is to distinguish carefully between what is documented and what has been added over time. By now, the case had become far more than a strange voice in a kitchen. It had become a test of witnesses, a test of the police, a test of the press, and a test of how quickly uncertainty can become legend. But the most important stage of the investigation was still ahead. Investigators now faced a difficult question. Could the voice be traced to a hidden person, to an unusual psychological phenomenon, or would every ordinary explanation fall short of the available evidence? Each possibility answered some questions and created new ones. That is often the mark of a genuine mystery, not a lack of theories, but the absence of one that explains everything. As the investigation continued, attention increasingly focused on one person, Pascuala Alcocer, the young housemaid who had been among the first to report the mysterious voice. Because she was closely associated with the earliest reports, some observers began to wonder whether that connection was more than coincidence. Could she somehow be responsible for the sounds? Or was she simply the first person to experience something no one could explain? Opinions quickly became divided. There was no clear physical evidence that Pascuala had deliberately deceived anyone. But in a mystery with so few answers, suspicion alone was enough to place her at the center of the investigation. Whether that suspicion was justified is still debated today. Authorities reportedly questioned Pascuala on multiple occasions. They also observed her closely as the investigation continued. Some observers suggested she might somehow have been producing the voice herself, whether intentionally or without consciously realizing it. Others proposed that stress, expectation, or psychological suggestion might explain at least part of what witnesses reported hearing. None of those explanations could be demonstrated with certainty, and none accounted for every reported detail. The investigation continued, but the mystery remained. Engineers and technical specialists also examined the building. They inspected the kitchen, the chimney system, and other concealed spaces that might have carried or reflected sound. They also considered echoes, unusual acoustics, and other ordinary explanations. Older apartment buildings can produce surprising sound effects. Voices may travel farther than expected, and reflections can sometimes create convincing acoustic illusions. Those possibilities deserved careful investigation. Yet none of the proposed technical explanations convincingly accounted for every reported observation. Whether that reflected the limits of the investigation, the quality of the surviving historical records, or the nature of the phenomenon itself, remains an open question. I'm thinking, one of the greatest difficulties in historical research is distinguishing between original accounts and later accounts. Over the years, dramatic details often persist. Ordinary details are more easily forgotten. People naturally remember the unusual, and they overlook what once seemed mundane. That's why historians start with a different question. No, what makes history better? But what can we actually verify? Because in every historical mystery, the difference between these two questions can change the entire conclusion. The newspapers played a major role in the Zaragoza case. Each new article brought more public attention. More visitors arrived at the building. More people came forward with their own accounts. Some reports were remarkably similar. Others contradicted one another. That does not necessarily mean anyone was being dishonest. Human memory is not a perfect recording device. It is reconstructive. It changes over time, and it can be influenced by emotion, expectation, and repeated retelling. That is why investigators and historians compare multiple independent sources instead of relying on a single memory alone. In mysteries like Zaragoza, understanding how people remember events can be just as important as understanding the events themselves. Eventually, the mysterious voice faded from public attention. The crowds dispersed. The official investigation eventually came to an end, without a generally accepted explanation. No one was convicted. No definitive source of the voice was established, and no scientific examination conclusively resolved the mystery. Over time, the Zaragoza case became part of Spain's folklore and popular culture, not because it had been solved, but because it had not. Some mysteries survive, not by providing answers, but by leaving questions that every generation asks again. Perhaps the most important lesson of the Zaragoza case is a simple one. Extraordinary claims deserve careful investigation, not immediate belief, but not automatic dismissal either. Critical thinking is not about choosing the most dramatic explanation. It is about separating evidence from assumption, testing ordinary explanations first, and remaining willing to change your conclusion when new evidence appears. Sometimes the evidence leads to a clear answer. Sometimes it does not. And when the record is incomplete, the most honest conclusion may simply be, we don't know. That is not a failure of critical thinking. It is often its most responsible result. My final conclusion is a cautious one. Looking only at the evidence that survives today, there is no convincing evidence that the events had a supernatural cause. At the same time, there is no single ordinary explanation that accounts for every reported observation. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is the most honest conclusion the evidence allows. Sometimes, the most accurate answer is also the least satisfying. History is full of questions that remain open. The Zaragoza case appears to be one of them. Nearly a century has passed. The apartment has long since become part of history. The witnesses are gone. The investigators are gone. Only the surviving reports remain. And one simple question continues to echo, louder than any mysterious voice ever could. What really happened inside that kitchen in 1934? Perhaps we will never know, but as long as that question survives, the Zaragoza Goblin will remain one of Spain's most enduring historical mysteries. Not because history gave us an answer, but because it never truly gave us one. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support really helps the channel grow and allows me to create more documentaries like this. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you won't miss future videos. If you'd like to watch more mysteries, disappearances, and true stories, be sure to check out the other videos on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.